Hey folks, it's the Mist and Fly here. I hope you're well. Now for the last few weeks I've been riding this, the 2018 Suzuki V Strom 250. I've really got under the skin of the bike. I've learned all I can about it to bring you this, my in-depth review. If you're interested in this bike, stick around and stay tuned. So the Suzuki V Strom 250 then, what's that all about? Well, as I say, I've been riding this for the last few weeks and I've really tried to understand the good and the bad points about the bike. And I'm going to bring you lists of those a bit later on in the video. I've ridden it in all sorts of scenarios, on all sorts of different roads, fast roads, slow roads, wet and dry, you name it, I've ridden it. So I'm going to talk you through some of those as well. Plus, at the end of the video, I'm going to take you through the costs of ownership of the machine. How much does one of these cost to insure, tax, ride, etc. So if you're interested in the V Strom 250, you're going to want to stay tuned.
It's all about riding around town and in the urban environment then. Well, I think the little V Strom is pretty ideal for town work. It's nice and light, as I've said before, at 188 kg wet. It's quite narrow feeling. You can get your feet down easy on the deck. So easy to slip through traffic. You sit on top of the bike, so you've got a good sort of situational awareness over traffic. Nice and easy to filter with if you need to. And yeah, overall, around town in the urban environment, I think I prefer this sort of bike actually to a scooter. Okay, you haven't got the carrying capability under the seat that a scooter has, but you can stick the panniers on here, carry your laptop, or change your clothes, get to work, whatever. No problem at all. So, in the wet then, absolutely filthy day today. It's been raining all day. It's still raining now, although it's calmed down a little bit. And I've been riding the bike a fair bit today, once the rain had ceased a little bit, just to get a feel for what she's like in these sort of conditions. And it seems okay. The tyres on it are made by a company, well, what's stamped on it are IRC, which I guess is the manufacturer, and then Road Winner, so they're IRC Road Winners. I've never heard of them. They sound kind of cheap and cheerful to me, but having said that, I've not had any incidents where I've felt anything let go on me, although that said, of course, I'm not thrashing it around on these slippery roads. So I suspect if you got one of these bikes and you're going to use it for commuting in all weathers, it might well be worth just replacing the tyres with something from a well-known brand, just to be sure. But as I say, having said that, I've been riding the bike today probably for the last, I don't know, 35-40 minutes, and I haven't had any problems on this very slippery road. In terms of protection from the weather, this screen actually isn't that effective. You are really pretty much in full wind blast, so again, maybe invest in a bigger screen. An aftermarket screen would keep some of the weather off you. In fact, perhaps I should just give you a little clean. Hope you can see okay. There we go, hopefully you can see okay. So you are subject to any, obviously, wet and stuff coming up at you. There is good news though. The hideous, well, I was going to say tail tidy, but the hideous rear end, that plastic stuff that doubles up as a number plate holder and as a mudguard, works a treat as a mudguard. I've got absolutely no water spray up my back or on the, on the sides of my jacket at the back, anything like that. So again, if you're going to be buying the bike for practical purposes, getting you to and from work all times of the year, even though that back end looks a bit hideous, it certainly does a good job of keeping all the crap off the back of you. And of course, the other thing to say about riding in the wet on the little V Strom 250 is the fact that you do have a little bit of a safety cushion with the ABS on the bike. It's actually got relatively sophisticated ABS, I think. It's from Bosch. It is 2 channels, so you've got ABS both on the front and rear wheels. So if you did grab a handful of brake in these conditions, that's likely to save you from a skid, which is such a great feature on modern bikes. So thumbs up for the ABS, maybe a bit of a thumbs down for the windscreen and the tyres, but another thumbs up for the mudguard on the back. But overall, for the sort of bike that is, riding the wet really doesn't offer any big problems. The frontal area is quite big on it, so actually from the sort of shoulders down you're relatively protected on it. What a hideous day to be out on a motorcycle. The things I do for you, eh? Now 250cc motorcycles aren't to be found on motorways that often, and there's a fairly good reason for that, and that is, of course, they're not very powerful. So you know, there's perception they can't keep up with traffic. But here I am on the M40, and I'm actually doing slightly illegal speeds just for demonstration purposes. Look, an indicated 85, just keeping up with traffic in the outside lane. I will just slow down a bit because I don't want to be breaking the law. But just by way of demonstration, you know, you can keep up with faster traffic on motorways, and certainly holding a constant 70 miles an hour indicated, I expect this speedometer overreads a little bit, is not difficult. So as you saw, there's plenty more than 70 to give on this bike. But then that's just with me on the bike, it's not too up, it's not with panniers. I guess if you're loaded up, you may struggle a little bit. In terms of weather protection or wind protection on these faster roads though, funnily enough, it's not too bad. I say funnily enough because this little screen I've been critical of in the past when I've been riding the bike, you get a little bit of turbulence off of it. But the faster you go, the less that becomes, strangely. And here I am, again, actually sitting on the inside lane of the motorway. But I am still doing probably over 70 miles an hour, everything else is overtaking me. But I'm not getting really bad buffet. I think it's lifting above my head at these speeds. That's, of course, in this particular crash helmet with this particular jacket and so on, it varies depending on what kit you're wearing, I find. So although I'm not sure you'd want to do miles and miles on motorways, it's certainly very possible to do. And if you've got a commute that involves, I don't know, 10 miles of motorway or something, and it's certainly possible. You've got enough oomph to get past trucks in the slow lane, keep up with faster traffic. Actually much better than I thought. My CRF 250 certainly couldn't hold these sort of speeds on a motorway. So actually thumbs up for the V Strom 250 on motorways and faster roads.
So how about a few practical items to do with owning the V Strom 250 then? Well, there's a couple of things that a number of you have asked me to cover in these in-depth reviews. First thing to talk about is the seating position. The bike itself has a fairly low seat, and I'm 5'8". I can get my feet on the deck fine. If you have a look at this clip here, I can get both feet on the deck, no problems at all, completely unintimidating. It feels nice and light, this bike. And for us shorties, vertically challenged types, you can certainly get your feet on the deck, so no problem there with regards to seating position. It's also quite a roomy bike. You can move around on it. It's not cramped at all. It's actually, for a 250, it's quite a sizable bike in terms of its sort of overall geography, if you like. So that's one thing. The other thing people have asked about are some of the practical ownership things, like pumping the tyres. How hard is that going to be on here, and maintenance? Well, this bike is fitted with these straight-through valves. It hasn't got the angled ones, but luckily, because it's only got a single disc on the front, for example, you can get at it quite easily. I personally would prefer to see the angled valves, but you know, pumping the tyres up, it's going to be no big deal, but it would be nice if they were angled valves, but there we go, they're not. The other thing, the bike doesn't come as standard with a centre stand, so lubing the chain you're going to have to do by either getting yourself something like an ABBA stand, or you're going to have to wheel the bike around to lube the chain. Just something else to be aware of. There is a centre stand available from Suzuki. You can buy it as part of a package, and you can probably buy it individually as well. It might be worth getting one of those if you're riding these day-to-day as a commuter type bike, because you're going to want to be looking after that chain and lubing it up. So centre stand is something you're going to want to consider as well. Other than that, no real issues, I don't think.
So before I show you what the bike's like to ride at night, I thought I'd just show you the lights, because a lot of people often ask me what the lights like on particular bikes. So when the bike is running normally, this is its just its sort of daytime mode. It's not an LED light, just a bog standard dip light. And then full beam doesn't look much different, other than much brighter. Okay, so that's what it looks like during the day with the magic of YouTube. Let's go to night. So at night, even though the headlight on here is just a standard halogen, not one of these newfangled fancy LED jobbies, the light is perfectly adequate. This is on dip as ever. I'm sure the GoPro won't be showing you the extent of the light, but it's a perfectly good light, just like a dip beam on a car. Put it onto full beam, bingo, and it's amazing. It's an excellent light. There's no problem with that at all, although, as I say, I'm sure the GoPro doesn't really show it. The LED display, of course, it doesn't flip to a night mode because it's on the white on black anyway, which looks absolutely great at night, so you don't get any glare from there. The only thing she doesn't have is illuminated switchgear, but to be honest, it's such simple switchgear on here, you really don't need it to be illuminated. So riding the V Strom 250 at night, absolutely no problems. The lights work a treat, even though they're the old-fashioned halogen ones.
So at the start of the video, I promised you that I would talk you through the costs of ownership of a bike like this. How much would one of these cost you to keep in the garage, ready to ride, excluding things like consumables. So I'm not including here things like tyres and brake pads that you may need to replace, but just how much would it cost? Not petrol either. So a few things that I've found out, done a bit of research for you. First off, tax or vehicle excise duty, as we call it here in the UK. Because this is a 250cc bike, this is going to cost you £42 a year for road tax. Divide that by 12, £3.50 a year for road tax. So pretty good for that. Insurance, went to my friends at Principal Insurance, got them to run off a quote for somebody in my circumstance. So this is only indicative. It only works if you're my age, living in my house with my no claims bonus. But if I was to insure this bike, Principal would do that for £82.88 a year, which I think is a bargain. So that's £6.90 a month. And then servicing costs, how much to actually keep the bike in tip-top condition serviced. Went to my friends at the local Suzuki dealer, that's Ford and Ellis, and got them to give me some prices. Now, I was quite interested. It turns out the service interval on this bike is 3,000 miles, which is quite low. I was expecting 6 at least, but 3,000 miles you have to get it serviced. Of course, there is a first service, a running in one at 600 miles, as is often the case with bikes. Ford and Ellis, they would charge you 125 for the running in service, and then at 3,600 miles, so 3,000 miles later, the second service would be £250, and then when you get to the big one, which includes the valve check, that's £300, and then it's back to every 3,000 miles, which is 250, at least at Ford and Ellis it is. So factored that in, if I add in the £250 3,000 mile plus the 600 running in for 125, divide it by 12, I end up with £31.25 for servicing costs. So that's based on somebody that's riding an average of 5,000 miles a year. So add those all together, the 350, the 690, the 31.25, that comes out at £41.65 a month just to have this bike in the garage ready to ride. Now I think that's okay actually. I've done quite a few of these calculations, and that's obviously one of the cheaper ones, but that's because it's got a smaller engine. So £41.65 budget for that. Also throw in a bit for tyres and brake pads, and that's basically how much it's going to cost you to run.
Okay, let's just pop down to my local train station here and see what she's like from a practical point of view, if you want to lug it about, car parking, that sort of thing. So I'm just going to go and find a couple of spare spaces. Let's see what she's like, turning circle like, and also if you're having to man or woman handle it around. I can't believe I have to say man or woman handle these days. What is the world coming to? Man handle, that's what it is. Okay, here we go. So we're in the middle of a standard British parking space, okay? Sticker in neutral. Stands nice and easy to get down. Now this bike is nice and light at 188 kilograms, wet, fully fueled up. So even when she's fully fueled, she's nice and light. And you've got this good grab handle. Moving it around on the car park, really easy. Okay, so it feels nice and light. I'm on full lock now. I'm just seeing if I can get into the next parking spot, and next but one. But I'd say as turning circles go, that's not too bad. So we'll just step back here, look. That's a complete 180 in the one spot. So yeah, nice tight turning circle and nice and light as well. So lug it about on your driveway, moving around in the car park, provided it's not gravel or something, then nice and easy. So non-intimidating. If you're a bit of a lightweight, or maybe you're a lady or you're a smaller person, then you're not going to have a problem lugging this bike around, even though it's an adventure style bike.
So washing the bike then, well, it's a big old adventure bike and they're never easy to clean, and the V Strom I guess is no different to that. You do need a brush to get into all the nooks and crannies, and you probably need to invest, if you haven't already got one, in a bike dryer like the one that I'm using here, just to make sure absolutely everything in the bike is nice and dry. But once she's done, she comes up looking absolutely spangly and clean, as you can see here, so no real problem.
How about longer journeys on the V Strom 250 touring then? Well, number of things to take into account. Number one, I would say you can tour, of course, on any bike, can't you? And it doesn't have to be a massive adventure bike to do that on. Just look at Ben King, who's going around the world at the moment on his CRF 250, for example. And Steph Jebens as well, who's just come back from doing exactly the same thing. So we know you can do long journeys on the 250, no problem at all. But what about this, the V Strom 250 in particular? Well, number one, it's quite a comfortable bike. Nice upright riding position, seat relatively comfortable, although I have found on a couple of the longer journeys that I've done, the seat is a little bit hard, can start to get a bit of numb bum after a while, but not a serious problem. The riding position is very nice. The other thing in its favour for touring is you can get side cases, panniers and a top box to the bike as well, so plenty of storage capacity. If you don't want to go down that route, you've got the rack on the back. You can lash a soft bag to that easy, so carrying stuff on the bike is pretty straightforward. It's got the massive fuel tank that I've talked about before, 17 plus litres it holds and 88 miles per gallon. You're going to get around about 300 miles out of the tank, so for touring that's a definite plus. You're not going to be stopping every 5 minutes to refuel. So yeah, as a proposition for touring, yes, it's not a huge power bike, but it's got a lot of practical aspects to it that make it an excellent bike for doing touring.
So I promised you at the beginning of the video I'll give you not only the good points of the bike but the bad as well. So let's go through the list of pros and cons, starting with the negatives that I've found out. I've made notes of these to make sure I didn't forget anything. First thing, tail end. I just don't think it looks very good from behind. That's often the case with lots of bikes. It definitely needs a tail tidy. What I would say is this big old plastic mudguard on here does work well at keeping you protected. So if you're buying the thing as a practical mode of transport, you might want to leave that on there actually because it keeps you nice and dry. But if you're riding it as a weekend fun thing, then you might want to get that swapped out for something that looks a bit better. So that's a small thing, just something I would do. Next thing, windscreen. Initially, I thought it was fairly ineffective, and I've kind of revised my views on this. It's fairly ineffective at sort of lower speeds, at the sort of 30 to 50 mile an hour range, but oddly, when you're a bit faster on motorways and stuff, cruising at 70, the wind seems to fly over your head a bit more. So the windscreen, see how you find it. It depends on what jacket and stuff you're wearing, what helmet combo you've got. You may want to put an aftermarket one on there. I'm putting that down as a negative because I think it could just be a little bit bigger, but not as bad as I initially thought. Slightly revised, but I'm still putting it in the negative pile. The other thing is something that I've mentioned before, no centre stand as standard, which is a bit of a nuisance on a bike like this. Would be very handy to have that standard. You can buy one as an add-on part though. Next thing, gears. Can be a little bit clunky. The gearbox isn't the slickest that I've ever come across. I haven't had any false neutrals or any difficulty finding neutral, so it works fine, just a little bit clunky on the gearbox. Mirrors, they look like barn doors. They work fine, there's no vibration, you got a good view out of them, but they just look hideous. You might, again, depending on how much of a tart you are, if you're like me, you might want to change them for something that looks a bit better, but they certainly work okay. But yeah, barn door mirrors, I think I'd change those. The seat. Well, that's pretty comfy and spacious. It's a little bit slippery. The finish on it, it's obviously a plastic finish. It hasn't got any grippy bits on it. And I found, again, depends on the kit you're wearing, but with my day-to-day riding kit, I just found it was a little bit slippery. You know, when you brake, you slide a bit forwards. And I was always ending up in the same position. So if I want to move forward or back, I always just slipped to where I was originally. So the seat, just a little bit slippery, I found. And over time, if you ride it for, it's good for an hour or so from a comfort point of view, but I did 1 2-hour ride on it and it was getting a little bit hard at the end of that. So the seat is a little bit hard over a long period of time, 30 minutes to an hour, no problem, couple of hours, starts to get a bit hard. And another thing that I thought was a bit of an omission on the bike, no heated grips. I don't know if there's a Suzuki option for them. I don't think there is, but certainly you can buy heated grips as an aftermarket part. So again, I would definitely do that on a bike like this, get some heated grips. So that was it, I think, for the negatives. Oh no, a couple more that I've got noted here. The other thing, suspension. Feels a little bit budget when you go down country lanes. Now, it is a relatively cheap bike to buy. It's £4,600 to buy, so suspension is one of those areas that they have skimped on. Generally, day-to-day riding, it's fine, but if you're pushing it around country lanes, it can get a little bit crashy. The exhaust, I actually don't think it looks too bad for a Euro 4 one, but it's very, very quiet. Now, that may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing. I personally like to be able to hear my bike, so I'd get that swapped out for something a little bit louder. And then last but not least, the service intervals, 3,000 miles. I think these days for a modern bike, 3,000 miles for service intervals, that's just a bit naff. I would have thought 6,000, 7,000 would have been better. Okay, that was it for the negatives. What about the positives? Okay, the positive points then that I've found out about the bike that I thought it was worth pointing out to you. So first off, very practical thing, very frugal to run. 88 miles per gallon I was averaging on this. So for a 250, I think that's pretty good. If you're riding it to work, fill her up at the start of the week, you might, depending on how far you've got to go, of course, you might get to ride the whole week to work and only put 1 fill up in it. So 88 miles per gallon, really frugal, like that. Allied with that, really big fuel tank, 17.3 litres, over 300 mile range Suzuki say. I've been getting about 300 miles out of a tank. So I think that's excellent and a very usable range. So that's the second positive thing. The engine, it's only a 250, but it goes well and it's nice and smooth. It is a twin, but it's not thumpy at all. There's no vibrations through the pegs or through the handlebars that I'm used to on a 250. Yeah, really quite nice, and it goes better than you'd expect a 252 as well. As you saw on the clips on the motorway, it absolutely holds its speed absolutely fine. You can cruise along at 70, no problem at all. Engine not under any stress, so it's a lovely little unit. And it being a Suzuki, I suspect it's bulletproof. So yeah, the engine is very nice and smooth. Size and comfort, I've said, although the seat itself on a longer journey can be a little bit hard and a bit slippery, as I mentioned before, the overall bike is quite spacious for a 250. So if you're a bigger person and maybe you're just starting out or you want a commuter bike, then I think this would fit you absolutely fine. The seat is nice and low, so it's not intimidating, but you can stretch out on the bike. It's physically quite a big bike for a 250. So that was another thing. Oh, clutch, nice and light. Clutch is lovely and light. It's a very easy bike to ride, nothing hard about this whatsoever. The instrument panel, love that. I've seen that on other Suzukis. I love the fact that it's white on black. It's just nice and clear. I think it's got everything you need. Really pleased to see a proper fuel gauge on it. It's got RPM, trip count. There's everything you need and no more. So the instrument gauge I really like on this bike. That looks really good. The bike generally nice and light, 188 kilograms wet, so it's easy to move around on your driveway or if you're parking or whatever. And it doesn't feel heavy when you're on the move. So nice and light at 188, and that's wet, fully fueled. I think the looks of it pretty good. I think Suzuki have done a good job on the styling. I think she looks very much like her bigger brothers, the 650 and the 1000. So I think you'll be taken seriously if you're riding it, which I like. And overall, the value of the bike as well. I mentioned before, $4,599 is what the Suzuki website quotes for this. So not an expensive bike by any means. So nice price as well. I mentioned in the negatives the quiet exhaust. I mentioned it again in the positives because for you that might be a positive. It is very quiet, sounds like a sewing machine. For me personally it's a bit too quiet, but if you don't want to upset the neighbours and you just want a pleasant relaxing ride, then that exhaust is nice and quiet. And then the other thing, I mentioned that the service intervals were low, but a good thing that Suzuki UK offer you on this is a warranty of 3 years. Most manufacturers only give you 2-year warranties these days, so the fact that Suzuki UK will give you a 3-year warranty on this bike, I think is fantastic. So yeah, that's another plus point. All right, so yeah, plenty to like about the bike. I think, you know, overall, nice looking package, good value, great little bike. Okay, so there we have it. That's my in-depth review of the Suzuki V Strom 250. You know, I've often said there are no bad bikes on the market these days. I've pointed out some of the things about this bike that I think could be improved, but overall, I just think it's an honest, good value for money bike. If I was having one, there are a few things I'd do. I would change that exhaust. I'd get a tail tidy on it. I'd possibly get a bigger screen, and I may as well also change out the tyres just for a better known brand, because those ones are a bit budget on here. But other than that, as I say, good honest bike, nice and cheap to run, comfortable, goes well. I read a few reviews actually that said that the people have found it a little bit underpowered. I haven't found that, so I think it goes really well. Anyway, so I hope that's been of some interest to you. If you're in the market for a small bike or maybe a first big bike, then can have a little look at the Suzuki V Strom 250. I think you might be pleasantly surprised. All right, that's it for now. Look forward to speaking to you next time. Till then, this has been the Mr. Flyer. Cheerio.